It's extremely important to choose a CDMO. If that CDMO has their own cell line, to choose one that has very strong cell line. And by strong, I mean it's robust, obviously has high productivity, has decent doubling time. Our cell line, Celexis cell line, is 15 to 16 hour doubling time compared to standard 24. So there are a lot of things to consider technically when you choose a cell line. Now, there are CDMOs who would take off-the-shelf cell lines and produce those as well. I think it comes down to choosing a cell line that will give high productivity and the normal distribution for glycans and other product quality attributes, but also robustness is a factor.
Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. I'm your host, David Bruhlman. And today we're diving into the critical world of CDMO selection with an industry powerhouse. Joining us is Sigma Mostafa, Chief Scientific Officer at KBI Biopharma. With her wealth of experience in biopharmaceutical executive roles, Sigma's insights on choosing the right CDMO partner are pure gold. Get ready to unlock the secrets of successful biotech partnerships. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Bruhlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Welcome, Sigma. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, David. Very glad to be here.
Sigma, share something that you believe about bioprocess development that most people disagree with.
That's a really interesting question. I'll say that in general, if you look at the entire bioprocess, people don't take harvest too seriously and they don't think it's that important compared to upstream and downstream development. But in my experience, a lot of the challenges that come into downstream can be addressed if we have a more well understood process, the handover between upstream and downstream, and a more controlled process in harvest. And I always feel like harvest or recovery is that stepchild that no one wants to spend time on.
Yeah, you often hear people talking about upstream and then downstream, but we forget the middle part, right?
Right. But it brings in all the garbage with the DNA and everything else, right?
Yeah. So Sigma, let's rewind to the beginning. What was the catalyst that ignited your passion for biotech and how that guided your career path? And what's been the most unexpected part of your biotech journey?
So for me, I've been from childhood very interested in science and math. And at some point, I realized that bringing these two together and actually having an impact of what I do is an amazing opportunity. And I grew up in a family. My dad was a mathematician where he named me Sigma. It was a mathematical name that he gave to me. So I was predestined in some ways to be in science side. But biotech for me is that practical application where you actually can work on a drug and it goes to market and it helps your family, which is amazingly fulfilling experience. So that was my passion and interest from the beginning. I actually got the opportunity to study chemical engineering and more focused towards stem cell therapies and such for my PhD, and then got into Eli Lilly and was doing process development and tech transfer, eventually came to Merck and then to KBI and now run a very wide set of functions. In my career, the trajectory that was unexpected is that at Eli Lilly, I was always transferring processes to CDMOs, to various CDMOs. And honestly, at that point, I never thought I'll work at a CDMO. And that trajectory, being on the other side, was unexpected. But it happened because as a family, we moved from Indiana to North Carolina, and this opportunity presented itself. So I had options in other places, but I could build something grounds up in a CDMO setting and also create a CDMO where we are doing true science, and it doesn't feel like we are just switching between programs, but creating in-depth capabilities. So I found that to be a unique opportunity, and I went for it. But I have to say that early on, when I was not in a CDMO, I had a different perspective around CDMOs. So now I can see from both sides.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation, Sigma, because there's so much going on in the CDMO space.
Yeah.
A lot of new CDMOs have appeared and really a lot of movement in that space. I'm really excited about. But let's start very high level. So what do you think are the most important factors that a biotech company, or in this particular startup, should consider when choosing a CDMO partner?
I think for a startup, oftentimes they are short on resource and perhaps capabilities. So it's very important to have a partner that has that deep technical capabilities. So they will shepherd you through your process, because you may have an asset or a technology, and then you are very much dependent at that point on that CDMO partner to give you the right advice, not just stay within the proposal scope, but tell you how to navigate the development, the manufacturing, and the regulatory landscape. So a partner that you can really trust, who would be a true collaborator and an extended essentially partner for you, is going to be super important. It's also going to be important that the CDMO has the technology and has a focus on speed. For startups, there is going to be that a cash flow challenge always, and speed is going to be extremely important. And then also in terms of scalability and execution, you cannot have situations where there is significant delays or missteps. For a startup, I think it's important to find a stable CDMO with deep technical expertise, also the mindset of customer focus, that they truly value the customer. And that's something in KBI I certainly have tried to establish and have established, is that we see our success as getting the molecules into market or into clinic. For us, success is not just, oh, this is the scope of program and we have completed it. Having said that, I'll also say that it's not a fixed in sort of definition of what that partner needs to look like, right? Because as the startup grows, and we have many examples of partners, customers we have that have stayed with us for over 10 years, and every year we have some molecules coming from them, and they have grown with us. So their need changes over time, and over time they may build capabilities as well. So the partnership and what part of CDMO does, all of that will evolve, and that's fine to create that kind of a trustful relationship, so that you start as you're entirely dependent on the CDMO, but over time, there's more capability in-house, and CDMO is doing some of the work, but also providing some consulting can be a nice model.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about trust, because choosing a CDMO can be very scary, especially for a small company, because sometimes you just have one asset. And if it fails, it's over and you just lost your chance. So there are obviously a whole variety of different CDMOs out there. Some that offer everything. It's like a one-stop shop, or others, they just offer parts of it. What are your thoughts about choosing a one-stop shop versus to maybe a CDMO that just offers part of it and is perhaps more flexible? What are the potential advantages and drawbacks of these two different CDMOs?
Very good question. And I'll give you some context here. This question is becoming more and more of a focus for a lot of our partners, a lot of our customers, because their portfolio is becoming more complex. As customers are getting into more antibody drug conjugates, other type of complex product, by definition, they're needing to deal with a lot of different partners, and just managing all of this partner itself becomes a challenge. So what I see pros and cons wise, one-stop shop is a nice concept. What happens, and I think customers, when they pick CDMOs, they're well aware of it, is sometimes the one-stop shop doesn't deliver any of the portions to the quality level, to the scientific level expected. So I think what's most important from a customer perspective is that you have a single point of contact. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be under one roof or even the same company, but if the CDMO can offer that, they will essentially take the risk and they will manage the other parties. So the customer is just dealing with one party. I think that meets the customer's need, and that also allows for the excellence that resides in certain CDMOs in certain areas and then partnering with another equally good partner. An example can be drug product, drug substance, or in other areas where having that partnership and then presenting a single proposal and a single contract can work very well for the customer. I think that is good solution, win-win solution for both parties. And one thing KBI did is for drug product, we have a relationship with Argonaut, a drug fill finish company, where we have essentially created a single proposal. Customer is dealing with just KBI, and that has been a good solution. I think it's challenging to be excellent in all the segments and to put that all under one umbrella. That's something we all aspire to, essentially, but it may or may not make sense depending on the business volume those segments will bring in.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging to find the right partner, and something you need to do as a company when you're looking for the right partners, asking a lot of questions. So what kind of questions should companies ask a CDMO, especially those who have limited CMC knowledge, but they very much need the expertise of a CDMO?
I think certainly the prior experience is something that needs to be understood well. How many molecules have you run through? What's success rate, manufacturing, regulatory success rate? Those are the basic things to ask. But second thing to ask is the communication modalities and the partnership ethos. Really, in a concrete way, the CDMO should be able to say, how do they share data? How do they communicate? Is there a particular electronic platform that can be used, or what exactly is the modality? How soon do you get informed? And also, what is the philosophy of the CDMO in terms of risk sharing? That depending on any kind of unexpected events that happen, what is the risk sharing appetite? Those are the key things. Truly understanding the technical capability of the CDMO in terms of scale up, in terms of technical challenges, and then being able to solve it. All of those are going to be important questions to ask. I do think that the overarching part, though, is where often challenges happen is that communication part and building the trust and relationship and a sort of a key customer model where customer feels truly valued and feels like they're getting the necessary attention. So to ask those questions up front and getting a clear answer is important.
What are the most common pitfalls biotechs encounter when working with CDMOs or when choosing perhaps also a wrong partner? How can these pitfalls be avoided?
That's a very good question. I think from the get-go, having the expectations fully articulated from the biotech is important. What is most important to them? Is it the cost? Is it the timeline? Is it the quality aspect? Is it the communication and being made aware immediately if there's an event, etc.? And if there's a particular deadline that they are trying to meet, having that aligned from the beginning, having a detailed timeline that they feel quite good about, or at least when they ask questions around it, that the CDMO can explain the connectivity of each of the segments of process. How is their cell line development connecting with upstream, downstream? Usually these are overlapping. What happens? How is one going to be impacted if something happens in the other? All of that, the CDMO should be able to explain well. There should be good regulatory record, and the CDMO should be able to defend it very well. Obviously, references should be check. And again, I think the most important thing when all things are equal is the culture of the CDMO and willingness to be transparent and work together to solve problems, because problems will happen. Some type of a trustful relationship from the beginning, and knowing that the CDMO has a culture of building relationship, I think is most important. And that's the place where I often see challenges, where we hear stories from our customers or from industry where things didn't work out with the CDMO. And oftentimes it's that culture component.
Yeah, that's such an important part. And many projects fail because of poor stakeholder management. And this is obviously very important in a company, but also as a CDMO. What are your strategies there to facilitate that right from the beginning, to make sure that you're communicating on the same level and the same language?
So from our end, the way we built the business is very much on our technical strengths. So one of the things we do is from the get-go, SMEs and technical leaders, even myself as the chief scientific officer for KBI, I would get involved and build that partnership with the leadership in the biotech farm, so that there is an open channel if there is questions, concerns, that they can escalate and we can solve those problems. And there might be sometimes we are working with a mid-sized company, but they're part of a larger company. There are multiple dynamic that's going on where as a CDMO, we can play a role to smooth things out. And we try to do that from the get-go. And the relationship is just as much with our business development rep as it is with technical leaders.
Now, let's look at the technical aspects, because let's assume a company has selected the right CDMO. They have done their homework. The first contacts have been well, and the projects has initiated well. But now that's just the beginning, and you have to make a lot of tough decisions and difficult decisions along the way. And two that come into my mind are the cell line development and the media selection, which are key, and they have huge implications. And if you get it wrong, you will have to deal with these consequences for many years, if not decades. So what strategic considerations should biotechs keep in mind when making these decisions with their CDMO?
You're right. Cell line and media is where it starts and it stays, right? The cell line is for the entire life cycle of the product. It's extremely important to choose a CDMO. If that CDMO has their own cell line, to choose one that has very strong cell line. And by strong, I mean it's robust, obviously has high productivity, has decent doubling time. Our cell line, Celexis cell line, is 15 to 16 hour doubling time compared to standard 24. So there are a lot of things to consider technically when you choose a cell line. Now, there are CDMOs who would take off-the-shelf cell lines and produce those as well. I think it comes down to choosing a cell line that will give high productivity and the normal distribution for glycans and other product quality attribute, but also robustness is a factor. These small process changes going to affect it, because then when you're doing your process characterization PPQ and you're setting your limits, it becomes a challenge. Media and feed have tremendous effect in terms of productivity and product quality. Now, some CDMOs have their own cell line, their own media and feeds. Others would be willing to screen different media and feeds. So we have our own media and feeds that we are bringing into market that are performing well, but we will always screen for media and feed because we want to give customer options and we choose the best one. We are not going to dictate you have to go with ours. So I do think that's a better option because at least it allows you to look at the best off the shelf as well as the CDMO's preferred media and feeds along with the cell line option and get the right titer, right productivity, but also right product quality. Obviously, if you have some kind of specific product quality challenge or you need some kind of a ADCC or CDC activities, you will want to make sure to maybe early work even in transient transfection and see what kind of product quality you will get and make a decision there what cell line line and media you will use. So ideally, if you have a product quality challenge, I recommend that you do a screening study where you can look at a couple of different cell line platforms and media and feed and choose the one that gives you the right product quality so that you don't have to solve the product quality issue when you are in process development, because it's a lot more challenging once you are in process development.
So what I'm hearing, Sigma, is that it does make sense to test different cell lines and then to compare the performance of the cell line and the product quality, right?
Yes, agreed. Especially for complex product. Like if it's simple antibody, I call them vanilla antibody, maybe you don't need to worry about screening. You know which cell lines are good, which are giving high productivity. You don't have a particular product quality need, then it's not an issue.
Now, throughout my career, I've had to deal with different CDMOs and I've also seen different scenarios. And there is another dilemma sometimes you face is what expertise do you keep in-house and what do you outsource, or where do you rely on your partner? What are your thoughts on that? Is there a middle ground, or it really depends, or how should we go about that?
That is a very good question. And I would say this is an area where, again, what we see is that our customers evolve and partnership model changes. What we often see is for startups, they may outsource everything, which absolutely makes sense. If it's a virtual company, small company, makes perfect sense. Eventually, some analytical capability or some early material, small material generation, small scale, quickly being able to capture, right? And small analytical capability is where people start in-house. It makes sense because our customers are looking at many different candidates, and for them able to do it in a fast and cheap manner to see if it's whatever animal model they are using, which is specific to their product type, being able to test it quickly makes sense. But those are small scale, not necessarily looking at if this is a manufacturable process, not solving the process development issues. So after that stage where we see customers building capability, which I think is the right model, is insourcing some of the analytical capabilities, maybe some downstream, and eventually maybe upstream, but definitely not pilot scale or manufacturing. It only makes sense to build the capability of large scale or manufacturing if you have a deep pipeline and this is going to be cost effective for you. So I think that's a big jump from having some lab scale capabilities to be able to do quick testing and be able to do the activity assays and things like that. Does that make sense, David?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really does make sense. What I feel is that it depends on where you're at with the company. Are you a smaller company, a bigger company, more experience or less experience? And it also depends on your strategy, whether you want to keep your assets and then go all the way to phase 3 or even commercial production, or whether you want to sell your assets.
That's correct. Very much so. If you are planning to sell the asset right after phase 1 or even before that, it does not make sense to build large-scale capabilities or even a full process development lab. Yeah.
And there you have it, folks. Sigma's expert advice on CDMO selection is a game changer for all of you who are considering working with a CDMO. Remember, choosing the right partner can make or break your project. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the complexities of CMC development, I've got something special for you. As your fractional CTO, I am organizing half-day strategy workshops where we will evaluate and refine your strategy with laser-like precision. Interested? Book a free call with me today. Don't let uncertainty hold you back, because together we'll craft a winning game plan that you'll set apart in the biotech world. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.